presence from the Jewish Labour Movement, who are strong supporters of Israel. And one of their representatives on our General Committee is the press something or other for the Board of Deputies, an ex-councillor. And every time we discuss and pass resolutions about Israel, Palestine, or anything remotely to do with them, he tweets and get people following him on tweet to say the people who voted for that should be expelled from the Labour Party. And as a result of this and of this basically harassment, there are several members of our party who will no longer vote. They will sit on their hands, not vote for those because they just hate being called racists in this way. So there's contradictions. Yes, there's an increased interest that we have to campaign around. We also have to recognise that it is having some effect, this campaign.
Thanks, Pete. Hugh, do you want to answer? Is that all right? Yeah, you start.
I'm sorry, I'm going to have to go in a minute. So
you did say.
Just a few things. I mean, I think free speech is a really important battle. But for me, as a solidarity campaigner, I want to keep my focus on the Palestinians. So I'm not saying that these arguments aren't worth having, but for me the priority is how do we best help the Palestinians. And so some of these things, I think we get into these very tight arguments about whether we can use this word, whether we can use that word. For me, the only question is this. What am I doing? If what I'm doing is helping move the Palestinian struggle forward, then I do it. If what I'm doing is not clear or is compromising in some way or maybe makes things more complicated for the Palestinians, then maybe find another way to do it, because I think otherwise you end up getting very, very, very sidetracked. Palestinians will say to you, they don't care what religion or ethnicity their occupiers are. Their occupiers are their occupiers, and that's who they're fighting. And that's for me really important. I'm a very, very pragmatic person. I can see some heads shaking, but that is the way I feel about it. I also think that people have kind of a bit of too much, people keep saying to me, oh, when politicians do or say something, oh, they're only doing that to get elected. Yeah, of course they're only doing it to get elected. It doesn't matter. The point is you have to make them move. So I don't care why they move. They move because we make them move. So yes, I think there's been all sorts of compromises in the Labour Party and so on. But the fact of the matter is that there is a mass of support for Palestine in the Labour movement on the left. And that is where the power is. And so it is our job to make our politicians do what we want to do. I don't want to demonise Jeremy Corbyn for pragmatic decisions he's making in power. Okay, that is the nature of politics. I'm going to make it impossible for him to do anything other than make sure Palestine gets a just peace. That is my job. That is my job, and that is what I'm going to do. Just lastly, on the twinning thing, sorry. I get asked this everywhere, and it's so well intentioned. I'm afraid I've never seen it work school to school for any length of time, and it's simply because the situation in Palestine is impossible. What I say to people is if you're genuinely interested in twinning, really the way to do that is part of a community twinning project. So there's a British-Palestine twinning network. There you've got longer term connections, and the twinning relationship can be between the community rather than a particular school. That has got much more viable long-term prognosis than a school-to-school twin, which the minute someone leaves, and there's a high turnover in UK schools, the connection is gone. So I would say go through the twinning network. Okay. Thank you.
I just wanted to pick up a couple of things. I mean, I think there's a few things that need to be said about the IHRA. There's lots of kind of myths and misconceptions about it. We hear from the other side that councils all over the country are adopting it. Actually, it's about a third of councils in the country, and lots of councils have decided to have nothing to do with it. And there's another big myth, which is that the IHRA itself, which until the day it was passed on the NEC, which I regret that it was, but until the day it was, the BBC and all the main media was talking about it as the internationally accepted definition of anti-Semitism. And after it had been passed, they start referring to it as an international definition. But it's not that international, and even within the IHRA member countries, it's not actually got the support it claims. There's 31 countries which have been brought into this process around this IHRA definition. And it's actually, they've resurrected an old definition from 2004, which was adopted by something called the European Monitoring Organisation Agency, which is meant to monitor anti-Semitic incidents. It wasn't meant to label people anti-Semites. It wasn't meant as a kind of legal instrument and that's what it's being abused for, and used and abused for. And in fact, of the 31 countries that had delegations at this meeting to actually put forward this definition, only 6 out of those countries have actually adopted it and fully endorsed it. You know, I heard on the radio Vanessa Feltz saying 146 countries have adopted it. She was only 140 out. You know, and so it's actually, you know, there's lots of kind of myths about it. In terms of Jeremy Corbyn's role, I mean, I'm not aware of what he said on BDS, and everything I've seen him say and do, and he's somebody I've known for 30 years, has been, you know, absolutely, he's not abandoning any principles around Palestine. And he actually, on the NEC thing, the reason it was lost on the NEC was not his fault, because the maths on the NEC worked against him. There were 2 people that absented themselves from that discussion who were on the left. There were 3 people who, in the meeting, who were basically on the left, who indicated they would not support his 500-word statement that he had wanted to put forward to go with it. You know, there was an inevitability that the NEC was came under such pressure to adopt it, and he wanted to basically subvert it with his statement, and he knew that the maths on the NEC was not going to work, and in the end he was only able to sort of put in a 1-line caveat about this not stopping any free speech about Israel and Palestine. Now, the Jewish Leadership Council understood the importance of that, because their first reaction was to put out a press release saying, congratulations, the Labour Party has adopted the IHRA. And then they withdrew it. And they said this caveat about free speech drives off coach and horses through the IHRA. Yeah? Because it's like saying, you know, okay, you've got that passed, but actually we're going to carry on making the statements about Palestine. We're going to, you know, do more and more of that. And so, you know, I've got no doubt that Jeremy stays absolutely true to his principles on justice for Palestine. Yeah, just on the definition question around anti-Semitism, Semites. I mean, yeah, it's anti-Semitism. The term itself was coined in Germany in the 19th century as a way of describing prejudice and hatred against Jews. It's not the best term, you know. It would be better to call it anti-Jewish racism or something like that. But I think if we start confusing with the, you know, the who's a Semite, who's not, you know, I think the real issue is about human rights, not DNA. Yeah, and you know, so I think, you know, we shouldn't, if you get entangled in that way of looking at it.
Thank you very much.
I'm happy to talk about the issues. First on HSBC, which is, there is an excellent leaflet here about Stop Arming Israel, which gives out the information and the details about how HSBC is involved in holding shares in the military and technology companies that are involved in the occupation and in Israel's armed forces. And what we have in terms of targets, like Hewlett-Packard, again there's excellent stuff here, and Stop Arming Israel, is they don't pop up at random, these companies that we think about. We have a discussion with the Boycott National Committee in Palestine, with our international partners, about who are the major complicit companies that we want to focus on and make a target. And we've done it with Veolia, G4S and other companies over the years. Our view is, although there is a tendency, well, let's go and find everyone who's got some connection with Israel and something somewhere, actually it works best, well, the phrase I use is when we jump together, when we put all our pressure and focus onto key targets to make a difference. There is already a dialogue going on with HSBC about what is their complicity, where are they involved, and us calling for them to disinvest from that. They are getting worried about the global impact that the campaign is going to have on their sort of reputation and so on. So that the details are there, but we are hopeful there is going to be a UN list that will come out of who are the complicit companies who are involved, particularly in the settlements and the occupation. But the names that are in the frame are ones that there have been discussions with the Palestinian organisations, with the BDS movement, and they're ones that we think are the most obvious implicit targets, and HSBC is, and I remember a meeting I had in Europe around it where there was a European official actually who was talking about how we have maximum effect in terms of BDS and trying to do things. It was follow the money, and it is the money that is the critical driver and supporter in terms of how things get into the trade union movement. On the definition of the Labour Party and those sorts of territories and things, I take a view that anti-Semitism is the hatred of Jews as Jews, and you're being motivated in terms of what you say, do or act because of that hatred. And whatever the definition, whatever the words, however they're there still has to be that motivation behind what you're doing and some examination of that, and I think that's part of a general anti-racist stance and campaign that we need to have. And I think councils, and I think the promoters of the definition have got it wrong. There's still the statutory obligations about equality, about freedom of speech, about all of the other things that apply to universities, councils and so on. And there are going to be fights in all these institutions if they seek to misapply the definition in terms of constraining people's freedom of speech or in terms of blocking meetings and so on. We are determined that we will challenge those instances where the definition is being used to stop meetings. We've had meetings threatened, the Quakers have had meetings threatened where things have gone on. But again, actually, I think they have pushed it so far that actually it's going to be a very unusable weapon for them in terms of constraining freedom of speech. But it is undoubtedly the case that the debate around it had a huge chilling effect on getting people being prepared to speak about Palestine, about getting the issue into the public domain and so on. And I think that is what is so important about what happened to the Labour Party and the TUC. It has broken the silence around Palestine in a public way that makes it credible and respectable for people to stand up. And I think the best way for us to, and I've always said this, the best way for us to protect freedom of expression is to use it. And for us to stand up and campaign publicly. Now, you might have your own different views about the definition and so on, but we're a solidarity organisation, so I take my guidance from what the Palestinian organisations and the Palestinians are saying they want us to do. And they're saying, we don't want you to spend all your time and energy having an internal fight inside the Labour Party about the definition of anti. We want you to be talking and campaigning about Palestine, what's going on, what our issues are, and building support. And that's good enough for me. If the Palestinians tell us that's what we want to do, well, that's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to keep on talking about Palestine. And people will say, "Oh, do you love this?" or what your line is. Actually, if you read the press and the media, they hate us doing that. I get attacked, criticised, hate mail, death threats and so on because I'm talking about Palestine, not because of my view on the definition of the IHRA and so on. And that's where I'm going to stick to, and that's where the PSC is going. And I think that is important. The PSC isn't actually party politically affiliated, although we did launch at conference with others a thing called Labour and Palestine, which we hope will be a network within the Labour Party of Labour Party members to build support. But Jeremy actually has never come out saying he supports BDS. He's always supported Palestine, he's always come out against the things that have been done, but he's operated within the framework of Labour Party policy. And Labour Party policy is not BDS. Labour Party policy is actually very conservative. It's about recognition, it's about a review of arms, it's about human rights and so on. And what we want is actually a grassroots pressure within the Labour Party rising up for BDS, for all the other things. So actually there is pressure on Jeremy to support the sorts of things that we want to do. And I don't think we should put all the focus on Jeremy, that you are the person who's got to do this. The focus should be on us, of making people support it in each local party, in each area. But I mentioned earlier on that Jeremy and I joined the Labour Party at the same time in the early 1970s. But I take my, if you like, experience of where Jeremy's commitment came from. In the Demonstrations and events that took place around the Gaza in 2014. At one of the meetings he joked, "Hugh, my wife is getting worried about you because I've seen you 17 days in a row at demonstrations, at protests, at organising meetings. I know where Jeremy is on Palestine. He is on Palestine's side, and I've seen it in action. I believe it to be in his heart, and I'm happy with that until the Labour Party's got a policy with him as Prime Minister that we can go forward." And it's not about recognition, it's actually about having action that a British government will take. And I don't think we should underestimate that if there is a pro-Palestine Corbyn government advocating action about Israel, what a difference that will make to the global field, and that's what I think we should be working for.
You didn't answer my question. I asked if the founding of Israel is a racist endeavor.
I answered the question. If you didn't like it, that's
You
tough.
didn't answer
Now,
that question. It's a yes